Okay, so I'm Nick. This is the Morse Slider from Richard Wolf, and this is the setup as to how to set up for those for a whole EP procedure. So first thing you're going to look for is this box is going to come up from SPD sterilized, and this will have your handpiece and cord in it. So we'll have these two items. This will be opened by a sterile team member, and you'll have these two right here. The first thing that we look for is the blue O-ring that's seated inside of this handpiece. So there is a blue O-ring that sits about an inch of the way down, and it needs to be inside of that notch. That's what we're looking for. If the blue O-ring is not available or is not in there for any reason, then the suction won't work properly. So we want to make sure that that's in there. This is the cord for the handpiece. This again comes up sterile. As far as the other items that we want to make sure that we have, specimen container that is disposable, that comes individually wrapped. This filter is disposable, comes individually wrapped. This is a sterile item, tubing for the vacuum, and that's disposable as well. A sterile Morse Slider blade that's disposable. And then a canister and lid that will come up wrapped from SPD that are sterile as well. So the first thing that we want to do is start the setup. So we'll go ahead and take the handpiece that we just talked about earlier, and we will use it to set up. So this first cord is going to get plugged into this top. We're going to match the red dot to red dot, so red dot facing up, and it should plug straight in. And then the other end of that cord is going to get plugged into the Piranha handpiece. There's prongs inside of this handpiece. We want to make sure that we don't bend those prongs so it plugs straight in. No twisting and turning, just plug straight in and plug straight out. So we're going to go ahead and leave that in for right now. The next step is our specimen container and our filter. So take the canister with the lid on it, and we go ahead and place that up here. Make sure that we have an opening for that. If it will go. There we go. Okay. So the specimen container is going to get placed in this top one right here. The filter has a clear arrow on it that shows you what direction goes into the canister. So we want that arrow face down into the canister just like that. Make sure it's seated properly, and then we're going to go ahead and clip these in the canister lid so it's all set. The next thing that we're going to do is take this tubing. This tubing will get sent down to SPD at the end of the day, whether it's 1 case or 5 cases. It'll get sent down to SPD at the end of the day and come back up sterile. So that's going to get plugged in right here into this filter. We're going to grab our other tubing, our clear disposable tubing. This is going to be the first end is going to be used. Sterile team member is going to plug this into the Piranha handpiece. And then the other end is going to get plugged into the machine. So this will get passed off to someone else in the room, and this gets plugged into the specimen. It's usually easier to come at it from an angle and kind of work it around until it plugs in like that. With the suction tubing, you'll notice that there is a piece right here that's slightly discolored. That piece is going to get plugged into this little valve clamp right here. So we stretch and we pull down, and it seats in there. So we're all set with that tubing. Last thing we have to do is set up the blade. We want to make sure this is 2 separate pieces. This blade, we want to make sure that we have both. It will come sterile together. And we just want to spin this until we see about 1/3 of the way open. It should look like a teardrop shape. Once we have that 1/3 of the way open, we're going to pull back on this collar of the handpiece, and the blade should seat right in. Once you release that collar, it locks the blade into place and you'll no longer be able to pull it out. This lever right here is going to remain in the on position during the procedure, and now we're all set. So if we pay attention to the screen now, the first thing it's going to ask, we're going to do a new treatment, and then it will say help in the setup. Always select yes, and it will run you through step by step of what you plugged in to make sure that that everything is checked off. So first it's going to ask you about the foot switch, which is right here. Looks like that. That stays plugged into the Piranha unit at all times. So we're going to press continue. This shows it being plugged into the canister, the vacuum tubing, which it is. So we'll hit continue. The tubing plugged into the back of the handpiece, which it is. We'll hit continue. And then the container, the specimen container at the top of the canister, which is plugged in as well. Once you hear that click, that means that it's ready to vacuum seal. So we're going to go ahead and hit continue, and the machine is going to evacuate. It's going to evacuate and create that vacuum seal. We want the evacuation to the bar to run slowly across the screen. So we're going to go ahead and hit that and look for it. It's running slow, which is great. That means that we're creating a proper seal. If that bar races across the screen really fast, then that means that we don't have a proper seal somewhere, and we'll need to go ahead and check all of our connections to make sure that everything is seated properly. So once that bar runs across the screen, then you're ready to start the procedure. Before the procedure begins, I would recommend priming your blade. So you'll go ahead and keep this blade in a water basin while you have another team member test the suction mode and test the Piranha mode. It's important that that's done in a water basin to prevent friction on the morcellator blade. And that is how to set up the Piranha morcellator.
And what do we do if we have to change out our suction canister or our specimen trap?
So your specimen trap is up here, canister on the bottom. As you're morcellating in the whole-up procedure, tissue will get trapped in this tissue trap up here, and the remainder fluid will fill up in this canister. As the fluid is rising, when it gets right about 3/4 of the way full, you would let the urologist know that we're going to need to swap out the canister at some point soon. So they will stop morcellating, and then we're able to swap it out. Before we swap anything or take any alter any connections, we're going to go ahead and hit stop. When you hear that noise, that means that the pressure on the machine is releasing, that vacuum seal has released, and now it's safe to take everything apart. So if we're going to swap the canister, we would just pull up on these levers of the lid. This whole thing will pop off, and then we can swap the canister, use the same lid, put it back on, lock it into place. If we need to swap the specimen container, it would be very similar. You make sure that you hit stop, and then we're going to go ahead and swap out the specimen container up top.
Thank you.
Of course.